I'm going to take a little time and talk about the national debt. Now, the thing is, a lot of people don't like to talk about that. It's like, ooh, they're all afraid of that one, you know. But other people like to talk about it, and they don't even get close to addressing it sensibly, you know. And then you have some people that are more practical about addressing it, you know. And usually, you know, you're going to get up higher at like the Senate level, where you have people that are really serious about looking at the model. You know, how is this going to work, you know. Senator Romney comes to mind. He's constantly looking at things, and he doesn't fit inside what people would call the normal Republican box, actually. You know, he's like in his own box, you know. So me as a Democrat, I'm also in my own box, you know. So when I say, hey, let's look at the model, you know, and we have to do something about this, and I come up with a plan. My plan is pay the debt off in 3 to 3.5 years without raising any taxes. People are like, what? How can you do that? Well, it's childishly simple if you understand how the model works. Now, basically, if we take a look at a comparative understanding of what people do with money, what are you spending your money on? And I think, you know, Romney from time to time, he'll say, we're spending money on interest instead of spending money on production, say. So, and if you look at the Chinese, about 22 years ago, a little more than that actually, the Chinese decided to do something that basically people are accusing and saying, well, actually they took that from our forefathers. It's basically a philosophy, if you condense it and compress it down, you could call it print to build. In other words, you print money and use that money to build new hard assets. This is something that, yes, our forefathers did come up with, actually. Matter of fact, it was one of the number one ways that our country originally got currency. It was an original way to justify printing currency, because people would say, well, how is the American dollar worth anything? Well, how much land does America control? And back a ways, people go, oh, land's all over the place, you know. You know, show us something solid, you know. Yeah, how many houses you got built that are done, you know? How many ranches, farms, you know, factories, you know, show us solid. How many blacksmiths, you know, show us how much hard construction you got. That was developed real estate. And that was the main point that the entire world looked at. When other bankers worldwide would look at something and say, what are these people actually really worth? They would look at, how much gold do you have? Okay. Well, what about silver? Okay. And, you know, you'd entertain things like copper, metals, you know. And then one of the things was, how much hard assets you got? Real assets. You know, because land was actually everywhere, you know. But did you develop it? How much developed land do you have? And that was the big key right there, is developed land. So, you know, the more developed land you had, the more justification you had to basically print money, because you had to have a balance. You can't have a whole lot of developed land and goods and services and have no currency. There's no way to facilitate trade then. You know, so you have to print currency to have a ratio. And then there's also the interest factor. You know, our forefathers got together and says, hey, look, we got to understand what all these banks are charging in interest, because if you know, they basically put a model together. If you charge 10% a year and you loan a certain amount of money, if you have 10% of the money that exists in the country and you loan it at 10%, this means that everybody's money is going to end up getting harvested back in. So basically it was discovered that model, that the model of saying 10% of money being what the banks would have to loan wasn't quite it. The banks had like over 50% of the money. So they go, okay, so look at this. So in other words, if they're charging 10% interest, what ends up happening proportionately is that in a very short period of time, in 10 years, the banks will have all the money because there's nobody left any place that would have money or be willing to release the money. So you'd have these huge gaps. You'd have the bank, you'd have some people that were already rich and decided not to keep their money in the bank and would be apart, and everything in between that would be like become a wasteland. There would be no way to facilitate trade, no one would have currency. So it was decided that you had to print whatever interest amounts banks charge, the government must print that amount of money. Otherwise, the concept of interest will consume the entire understanding of what is currency in the process of facilitating trade. And a lot of people don't like to talk about some of these, or they don't like to talk about how certain people rate things, you know. So because under the model that I work with, it's modified. It's a major modification on the model. But the Chinese modified the American model too. So, you know, I've looked at certain areas of what the Chinese have done, and we would have to talk about whether or not we would want to follow that idea. But on the whole, the Chinese now have, I believe they have 87 million vacant pieces of real estate. And people will say, oh, wow, you know, wait a minute, they got this huge vacancy problem. And someone goes, how can you have 1.4 billion people and have a surplus vacancy rate on structures, you know, that's 87 million structures, I think it was. Maybe it might only be 78, but it fluctuates there. People say that there's a problem. They go, well, there's a flood. The prices of real estate are going to crash in China and all this other stuff. And when I evaluate what these people say and then go look at the numbers, I have to start shaking my head and say, no, you guys didn't look at these numbers right. You know, now, first of all, the Chinese wanted to build a lot of interior space. They just started adding cities. So it's just been decided, we're just going to build 10 cities. Boom. They're interior. They're deep interior to the country. And nobody wants to go from the coastal areas deep inland. They don't want to do it. You know. So because China's partially landlocked. The United States has oceans on three sides. You know. So the interesting thing is the deep interior. So what you actually have in China is real estate that is always going to hold real big value because it's popular. It's close to their coast. People like it, you know. Oh, sure, you're going to have some market fluctuations, but it's hard to get people to say, gee, would you travel 800 miles inland or 500 miles inland? People didn't want to do it. They're like, man, I like it here, you know, the weather's better, you got a breeze, so you have all these people that they want to be within hopefully be within 150 miles of the coast, but there are obviously exceptions to this. But so what happens immediately is when you really look at the statistics, what some of these people are saying don't make any sense. Actually, China is sitting really, really pretty. And other things that people don't understand when you start analyzing what China did is they started up over 10,000 new chip manufacturing plants. 10,000. And this was like 6 years ago, 7 years. So a lot of these are basically completed now. So they're producing so many chips, it's mind-boggling. And, people talk about the technological edge, this versus that. Well, I'm not convinced. Sorry, I'm not convinced. Now, by volume, as to the volume of higher-end chips, I think we still have a very slight advantage, but I equate things different. The difference being is that if you have computers that operate at a slower processing speed, but you have more RAM memory that you're utilizing, and that and more fast, you have more RAM memory, and you have more CPU fast track memories, stuff like this, you can do massive computing, and you're going to get the job done. There's different types of jobs that you don't have to have a quantum computer to do the deal. So that all having been said, so basically what China's done is they're really solid. So they could basically say, we'll give people a grant. We'll sell you chips, and we'll help you buy this real estate that's available now at a discount rate, and you can immediately start filling these structures. By the way, these are not all houses. They're buildings of every size and shape. Warehouses, factories. They pre-built stuff and then didn't activate it, basically. So it's like massive ghost towns of brand new stuff. Brand new. So they can instantly start filling these buildings up with computers. We don't have a place to put things. We have more people coming into this country than we have on the productivity ratio on housing and buildings. We have companies leaving cities and people trying to fight to convert areas, but they keep in mind the cities are already over-densified. There's too much density, there's too many people. And you look at the freeway system in LA and other areas, and it's just wow, hours and hours and hours of extra time driving back and forth that you shouldn't have to do. So there's a lot of physics to the city physics to make your models work right, because now we're choking. Economically, we're choking. We're doing all these things that are inefficient. They're counterproductive to making the model work right and work smoothly. So focusing on print to build has been a philosophy I've been booking since 2005. When I announced and I was running for president 2008, and every presidency since then, print to build, print to build, print to build. And work with the models. And I'll just tell you, it's in my opinion, none of these people really know how to work with the models. Neither Trump nor Harris know how to work with models. Forget it. And then you have, I could go on. I talk about it. I don't like talking about it all the time. I'm very upset. I don't like people who attack archives, and I don't like people who basically shirk their constitutional commitment to protect archives. It's right in the Constitution of the United States. So, when you start talking about the two candidates, I don't want to go there at the moment. I want to talk about modeling and the way we move this forward, because paying off the national debt in 3 years is a piece of cake without raising any taxes. In fact, I'm thinking about reducing taxes upwards of maybe 10% in a phase-out, but there's a catch. I have strings attached. Companies are going to have to sit down and work the deal and say, you only get the tax cut if you apply the money in certain areas. That would be, you have to partner in the generation of new assets. Part of your money is going to have to go, part of that 10%, let's say 2%, would have to end up going to a contribution completion bond guarantor match fund for basically unions, for employees, so that backing them to build more hard assets and making their lives more solid from an asset standpoint rapidly gives a chance for both sides to do what? Both sides do what? They're partnering together. They're both going to make a profit. Okay. So this makes everybody more solid and makes more profit for everybody. But that's a big sit down. That's a big sit down. And that's a lot of work, but basically making the model work is not as hard as you think. When we look at all the areas that we have what I call loan discrimination, we have the most screwball system probably in the world to discriminate against people to get loans, and it makes no sense at all. And, basically you have somebody that's wealthy that walks up and says, well, I don't need the loan, but I'll put $1 million on the counter, loan me $168 million to build this 400 home housing project. And they're like, yeah, okay, we'll do that. So these people make $140 million in less than 3 years, and all they fronted up was $1 million. So that's, 140 times your money. 140 times your money. But the banks have a trick. They say, we're not going to loan anybody any money unless you have completion, bond, guarantor, insurance. And we want a no fault, no guaranteed no loss on this. So that insurance is also built in the project. So in other words, the bank can't lose. It's impossible for the bank to lose. Well, you can do the same exact loan setup with every single vested American citizen. But we don't do that. We currently discriminate against people. We discriminate against black farmers. We discriminate against lots of people. So my philosophy is change back to the original. You come to America, you immediately have the right to build your own home with your own hands. And originally, anybody who would suggest that you didn't have that right would be a lunatic. And, you couldn't run for office on any kind of scheme that would basically be negative to you building a house with your own hand. You would be found someplace, hung up by a rope. You'd be gone. Nobody would tolerate it. And somehow, slowly, evilness, in my view, has crept into our country. And every citizen believes this. They actually do believe this, that corruption has crept in. So putting us back to the original colonial system, guaranteeing for everybody, makes instantly adds home building to an availability factor. And even though only 24.8% of people on surveys say, yeah, I'd actually follow that process, I would build a new home. So that's an incredible low number. It's actually the truth. I was amazed. I said, this can't be right. I'd keep going out and talking to people, and it seemed to be right. A lot of people, they're not motivated to do certain things. They want to live in apartments or whatever they want to do, but still. So this is going to open up basically a lot of home building. Plus you add to this. I've added people's personal shops, outbuildings, extensions, a whole lot of justification of building other than just home building. I've added a whole lot, and it's all solid. It all checks into that solid guarantor, solid idea, solid growth, and by the way, it's worth a solid amount of money. So it's going to hold its value. So that's going to end up being like 74.8 million new construction projects, some of which people are going to say, well, I got a 2-bedroom. Can I use this deal to extend and turn this into a 5-bedroom house and add a 2-car garage? Yeah, that's included. It's new asset. The trick is not to go buy a new stick-built home. No. You have to build it. You have to create it. That's the trick. That's the strings. You have to build it. Can you get help to build it? Yes. Yes. Okay. But it's not a pre-made deal, because the idea is you have to generate something at a wholesale value. In other words, a home that retail is worth $300,000. The idea is to bring the whole project in at $210,000, so that you're going to end up with $90,000 equity. And by the way, that doesn't include you paying your own labor at a really nice union rate, plus the bonus, because you're also the owner developer. There's a bonus factor in there as well. So then this other one is going to be other extra. You can either not sell it and keep the $90,000, or you can sell it. And if you do this project, I need to finish it and look at it. Essentially, I would like to make it completely a no tax zone, a zero tax zone on anybody doing this. Basically, I've designed a way where people can make an extra 120 or 40 grand a year between cash or asset acquisition if you don't sell. So a combination. Now, here's the beauty of it. See, the beauty of it is that That $300,000 new hard asset didn't exist before, and it was brought in for $210,000. That leaves a $90,000 new creation area, basically. There's actually more than that. I don't want to get into the chain of all the individual cogs and point out that it's actually more than 40% new generation. But so you just cut it off at basically it's 30%, and the government's going to print the money because it has to print the money to balance the balances for facilitating trade. Well, the government makes more money off of print to build, off of new hard assets being printed, than basically it does taxing people, taxing average people. It's ridiculously time consuming to keep the accounting going on all these different little taxes. The idea is to simplify things. So you're talking about equating work that's already done, and then basically there's going to be an assay or estimate of what could be the fair market realization. Yet, if you don't sell it, you can't charge somebody taxes on fair market. You can only charge them tax on what they've spent, if you're a local tax assessor. But again, I wanted to talk about that and work a new program because, so in other words, if every person that does this, and this program would work for people that even flip burgers. Why? Well, they're going to take part of the work themselves at union pay, number one. So the concept is that you're going to want to keep working this way, and it can be self-perpetuating if you want. But we're also doing the balloon payback, and the graduated payback is the idea to do this. Get the stimulus going. Let's get everybody in high gear and get so much construction happening that there'll be absolutely no problem. I've got a bunch of other things that are complex, but those are a lot of industry items that I have to sit down with industry and discuss. The average homeowner out there, you're going to be completely lost if I start getting into all these heavy ideas on the final touches, on dotting the I's and crossing the T's, on how it's going to work in different areas of industry, because everything's changing all the time. But it's all fair. It's all about fairness, max production, fairness and max production. So, and there's a lot of stuff in there for unions, union pooling, extra home factors. So you as a one person, you're building the home factor. Then there's the factor, but you're a union member. Oh, well, now you're participating in a union co-op construction of a vacation resort, somehow, whatever it is, We decided to buy this little island or a little piece of property on this island. We're making our own resort, whatever. So there can be up to 7 projects into this. It depends on situations, on your income, whether or not you're getting extra work out of this. Unemployment will be basically a negative 33%. Negative 33%. Because I have a max production policy, and I'm sure that there's lots of people out there that are going to take one look at this program and that program and say, yes, let's do that. That's a good idea. I want to do that. Let's do that. So, a lot of people would say, let's change my work week. Let's work a deal. Let's get my 40 hours in 3 days, 4 days, maybe you want a 4 day, whatever, 3 days. And then you got these other days that, well, why not use them on a schedule that you decide, intermittent or whatever. But the hours time of how many people are going to want to work solid and how much is going to come out of this is going to, the goal is to set a minimum standard of negative 33%. So that basically, that's a job and a third for everybody. So, that's you could call it guaranteed OT for everybody. But it depends how you do this. The OT might be your business, paying yourself a higher union wage. So there's a lot of union and guild backing into this, but they're all in brand new creative ways. It's about improving yourself and guaranteeing the projects. So, you're not going to be going to the employer and say, we need more money. This is about you're a union, you're a collective, therefore as a body, you're bankable for a large number of extra projects. So let's do this. So I want to facilitate trade. I want to stimulate the economy. I want to build assets. I don't want to end up paying money on interest to continue to perpetuate a long-term national debt. Let's get that out of the way. Let's get that done. So 3.5 years, depending on how much people struggle, because I'm going to move the model back to working with a very high-end new modified model, and it's all based upon our original forefathers setup, basically.